involved in these notes, you know, so you can pull it out of the bag. Well done for how you're presenting it on PowerPoint. Is it still going to be able to be linked to this so that people will be able to see all of this after?
Yeah, I'll link it to the Tumblr page. I need some help with that.
Because I don't know about linking PowerPoints. Do people have to have PowerPoint to be able to see it?
Yes.
So it might be a good idea to just put
you can
download versions of everything into a Tumblr page.
That's what I said. There's a backup on the Tumblr page.
With the emblem.
Okay. Okay. So I think Jacob knows, but that just work out how to do that later.
Yeah.
Okay. I would start off with engaging the audience and asking them what they know about the British invasion.
Possibly making some activities. Yeah.
Hopefully everybody here now knows that it's not a war.
I know.
That's all that comes up when you search just British invasion.
Yes.
No?
Yeah.
It's just like random shit.
Now, ask them what they know about it first to find out what they know, so that you can then later on, you know, if you bring up something somebody's already mentioned, you can then say, yes, just like Connor mentioned earlier, here's a bit more about that. You know, so you're inviting them into what you're talking about. I think when you were reading at the beginning about 1964 article about the Beatles, do you mean, Harry, that's where the term British invasion came from?
I think so, yeah.
Because I think that's what you mean. That's quite interesting, because obviously these terms come about, don't they? Different, you know, like rock and roll itself was a term somebody mentioned once on a radio program and it stuck. You know, it's like these things that originate somewhere or another, and that's what it must have felt like to the American music scene. You know, all these Americans trying to make money out of pop music, or the British are taking over. You know, now. I think we should hear some music straight away.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reading going on.
I think we should
a lot of things that we're seeing, but we're not hearing. Your presentation, we don't hear enough, anywhere near enough of the music. I think that you need to not talk about blues, but talk about British blues that was popular. Do you remember I showed you something in that session before rock and roll came back in this country? There was people were getting in, you know, not everyone, but certain people were getting really, really into American blues, because the American rock and roll they heard got them into American music, and then when that kind of died out, it left a gap, and they searched back to where that music came from, and that's why you had people like Howlin' Wolf coming over, playing to British crowds, and then British people young people starting to get interested in playing the blues. And that's a lot of those actually we're talking about, the Animals, the Yardbirds, the Rolling Stones. They were into pure American blues first, not really rock and roll. That's what they were first playing. You need to mention that. Something you haven't mentioned that you need to mention is skiffle. So there was a huge craze just before British people started playing rock and roll, and what got a lot of people into playing was this genre of music called skiffle.
Not the one that they use literally anything as an instrument.
Because people were poor in this country. They didn't have musical instruments. They didn't have electric guitars and amplifiers and drum kits and things. The Americans could pick up those because they had more money economically at the time, but we couldn't. So anyone who wanted to play music, there was this guy called Lonnie Donegan who would play this version. It's kind of American roots music that you can play using anything. So people they'd probably have a guitar involved, but people would have like a washboard with some thimbles, a bass made out of a broom with a piece of elastic on it, and a tea chest that you could boom, 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 boom. You could make that.
Documentary thing. It was mentioned about that in the beginning. It's like an hour long, so I've got to try and sit through it.
Yeah, but that's what you should be doing, right? You should have all of this stuff that you're reading at the beginning. You know, it can all be done in documentary. You know, you're talking about music and you're talking about fashion without us seeing anything. You know, there's no point talking about fashion and fashion design and stuff without showing what that fashion looks like. And there's documentaries for that. So I think you need to find at the beginning some documentary footage that just blasts you into the early 60s London swinging 60s fashion. It's that Austin Powers type feel, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of, you know, more brightly coloured things, people, you know, in the mini skirts and the dancing and the clubs in London, in Soho and all that kind of stuff. But the kids were playing the Beatles were in a skiffle band before they were in a rock and roll band, and so I think you should mention the British Blues. You should mention skiffle, and by mention I mean find a bit of documentary footage that does it for you. And you should also mention that there were these horrible manufactured rock and roll acts that were out before the Beatles that were trying to mimic Elvis. You know, Billy Fury. They'd give them these names that weren't really their names. You know, Cliff Richard was part of that kind of scene. Really kind of a safe copy of what was meant to be rebellious, but it's these were manufactured, and they were trying to sell British versions of that, but it was rubbish really compared to the kind of Beatles and the Stones and the Kinks and these guys that were looking at the more rawer black American music, and they were going back to the source, you know. All of those guys that you mentioned acts at the beginning, that's great. But let's hear a piece of music from each of them. You know, you had what did you have? The Yardbirds, the Animals, the Stones.
I didn't have enough time to crop all that last night.
So that's great. It's really good. They're the main players that came out part of the British. Let's hear the music. You know, that's you want to get people to hear it in their ears to hear. So play videos of all of those artists. And then, have you got a practical demonstration that you can get up and play for everybody?
Yeah, we've got the Kinks, you've really got them.
Yeah.
Because I really like the dance stuff. That video of all the dance styles was great.
Just get
Thanks.
Everyone up. Copy Jacob. Jacob will be copying the video. Everyone else will be copying Jacob. And everyone will be embarrassed and laughing. But they'll remember.
No one's actually going to get up and move, you know.
They will
They
remember
will.
it.
We can force
So,
them. If we all
yeah.
get behind them, we can physically pull
Get
their
up,
chairs
make
out.
They're just
Done.
going to take me for a
Just
joke.
be like, copy.
So that was really fun. So I would then get up and do your practical demonstration, which I'll hear tomorrow when you're rehearsing. Right, I'll come and hear that with you tomorrow. Then, do the technical stuff. Television's a good thing to mention. All that stuff you mentioned about Liverpool being a dock and the sailors and the money in America and all that, that's all great. And Nathan's going to play some of the Please Please Me documentary footage. The beginning of that whole that big documentary is great, puts it into a bit of context. But you might want to skip to some bits within it where they're talking about how they record.
Okay.
And the important thing to mention is just 2 tracks, you know, it's done like a live act. Later on in the 60s is when multi-track recording became popular. So 2 tracks would, you know, you could, out of a 2-track recorder, you could record more than 2 tracks, but the only way you could do that is by having 2 of them.
Yeah.
And you then record 2 tracks onto one, mix it how you want those 2 tracks to be mixed, and then record it back onto the other tape, and then there'd be another track on that tape. You lose quality every time, you know. So then there was a 4-track recorder come out. That was state of the art, 4 tracks. And I think Sgt. Pepper was like 1967, 8 tracks. Wow, 8 tracks.
Now we have unlimited.
Now you can have as many tracks as you want, you know,
That's actually
digitally, you know.
I couldn't believe that I remembered that.
But it affects
read that this morning.
what you can do, doesn't it?
1964, April the 4th.
So I would all the social background stuff. I would do that at the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know
so-
why that got put to the end. I
Play a
must
bit
have
of-
messed it up.
Play a bit about skiffle and British blues and the manufactured rock and rollers. Play a bit of early Beatles. Then talk a bit about the social background and why that was happening to them there, and then all that kind of stuff. Then play a bit of the Animals. Then play and mention when you play those videos the characteristics that are coming out of those songs, what makes them sound like early 60s recordings and all of that. I would, once you've been through all of this and you've put it all back together and you've got your presentation finished again, make a Kahoot.
Yeah, that would be sick.
tell them at the beginning of the presentation there's going to be a Kahoot on this at the end, and just make up
One
10
loose
questions
shit.
of things that are specifically in your presentation. So, do you know how to make a Kahoot?
Yep.
It's really easy to sign up and have your own, it's just a login that you make, and then you can easily make one. They let you do a certain amount of questions and whatever. So that's a bit of fun, but make sure you do that after you've added all these notes so you know what exactly your presentation is going to contain, and spread out answers amongst all of the stuff you talk about. That is my feedback. So you can stay in here now till 1 o'clock doing some more, but then you're only rehearsing for half a day tomorrow, so you've got plenty of time to finish it before Friday.
How do you spell skiffles?
So I'd spend this afternoon rehearsing while you've got a booth, because I'll have the other 2 groups in here to do this, and spend the other half of the day tomorrow when you're not rehearsing applying these notes, and you'll be ready to do it on Friday. How's your song? What's your song?
Oh, bus stop.
Bus stop.
How's Bus Stop?
I mean, I've listened to it.